Welcome back into the podcast. Excited to do this. I've been talking to both these guys for weeks, months even about getting this done, doing it here. This is the first start of June. This podcast coming out first thing Monday morning as the Bears are getting ready for minicamp. It is the Bootleg Football Podcast with Brett Kollmann and EJ Snyder. Of course, you get that podcast wherever podcasts are on YouTube as well. And they join me now. Guys, excited to have you on. How you doing?
I'm great. EJ and I, we finished 2 divisions of our summer series. I'm about to fly back up to Seattle to do 2 more. I think we're saving the North for last. So I think we'll be talking a lot more Bears on your show before ours.
Well, that's all right. And you guys can, I don't know, maybe take do a show from the ferry to Whidbey Island or something and Pacific Northwest. So you guys got the best backdrops. So let's dive into some Bears talk here. And I'm curious to get your guys' position on this offense and Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. And I don't think we need to go through the draft process specifically for them because it's been talked about ad infinitum. But look, this offense, and Brett, we'll start with you because I know EJ was on this podcast just before the draft. This offense, to me, it's an exciting offense for multiple reasons. I think what Waldron's going to be able to do. Obviously, the talent is loaded. The Bears have never had this many mouths to feed. I talked to Will Hewlett, and he had me all gassed up. He was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think the Bears have approached this the right way. And like I saw an article, I think it was last week, talking about quarterback situations and calling Caleb Williams' situation the second best situation ever for a young quarterback behind Dante Culpepper, who of course had Randy Moss, Chris Carter, and I believe Jake Reed was still on the team at the time. So when you're in that category, Brett, it's a great position for a rookie quarterback.
And honestly, when you also factor in the quality of the defense, or at least what we expect the quality of the defense to be, when you factor in that they have more running backs than they know what to do with, you could argue it is the best situation. It's at least the best since 2016 when Dak came in behind the best offensive line in football and still had, Dez in his prime, rookie Zeke. Like, it's at least the best in the last decade. And honestly, the thing that I'm most curious about, because we know Shane Waldron loves 12 personnel so much, but his 11 personnel grouping is so talented. It's like, does he move away from what he's traditionally liked to do and just stay in 11 all day? Because like, if you have Keenan and DJ Moore and Rome, you kind of want them to be on the field, and we'll screw the extra tight end just to make sure we have all these receivers. I'm very fascinated to see what he does because he has more dudes than he can put on the field at one time, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, and Gerald Everett is not a slouch, and Gerald Everett is the type of guy who usually the Bears would bring in to be like their second or third receiving target, and he's like the 6th.
At best. Like, at absolute best, he's the 6th.
Absolutely. So EJ, let me ask you about the offensive line, because I thought the Amagaji draft pick was interesting because to me that signified that Ryan Poles doesn't really think Braxton Jones is an extension candidate. That's what that process looked like to me. I think there's still a lot of questions on the interior. I love Tevin Jenkins, but of course health, and he's up for an extension. Darnell Wright looked the part a lot last year. So plenty of weapons. Is this offensive line going to be able to keep Caleb Williams upright enough?
I sure hope so. They've invested to try and make that happen, but as you know, paper and grass are 2 different things. So I think a lot of people going into the draft said, hey, the middle's fine, right? They went out and got their center via trade, and now the guards are good. There were a lot of people saying the guards are good, and I was like, are you sure? Because they weren't good last year. Like, Tevin's great when he's healthy, but he wasn't healthy all the time. And, Nate on the other side was, in and out. Like, and even when he was in, he wasn't great. So I was like, are you sure that the inside's good? So it was funny that, they went tackle, but I disagree a little bit about Braxton not necessarily being an extension candidate. I think Poles wants competition, and I am all for that. So if Amagaji ends up being a talented third tackle, great. If he ends up pushing Braxton Jones and Braxton Jones is the third tackle, also great. Still better than their situation last year. So I'm hopeful about the improvements. But we've got to see it come together. They have enough guys, I think, but it has to come together, because if it doesn't, I'm not going to say all this could be for naught, but we're going to see Caleb running around, whipping it up more than we want to, which is a lot of what we saw last year at USC when the protection broke down.
Well, and EJ, I'll say this about Braxton Jones, and this is kind of where I look at it. Braxton Jones on his current contract and as a 5th round pick phenomenal. And what you're getting out of left tackle is phenomenal. Braxton Jones at a 16 to $18 million a year contract. I'm not so sure anymore.
Yeah, there's a balance there. And I think it's great to have, NFL is competition at its core. Your job is never really safe. There's always somebody coming to take it. And if Braxton has to look in the rearview mirror and say, hey, this Amagaji kid who they spent a decently high round draft pick on is pretty darn good, and I've got to continue to push my game to stay ahead of him, that's great for the team. Like that's a good thing. I'm not saying this is a bad situation. It's an improved situation from last year. I like Amagaji as a prospect, and Larry Borum's in there too, in terms of like, hey, are you going to be on the team? And he's got his papers, right? He's got his notice of like, oh man, I better outplay the rook or else. And right now it looks like or else. That's a great position. That's when guys either make or break. And that's what the Bears need. They need 5 guys on the offensive line that can make it.
I think that's what, honestly, the Larry Borum thing, I think is why they picked Kieran. It's like, if somebody goes down, we really don't want Larry to be the one that's on the field. I kind of feel like that's how they played it.
Plus, Borum had that performance and proven performance raise on his contract, so he's making $3 million a year. Like that's a lot of cabbage for Larry Borum. So, yeah, no, I absolutely think even Matt Pryor there has I think a better chance, at his than Borum. I think Borum's days are probably numbered here. But while we're talking offensive line, Brett, let me ask you about Amagaji and what your thoughts are on him. Like I liked him as a prospect. I did a top 100. He didn't make my top 100. He was if it was probably would have been in the next 10 or 12. But, I didn't love the pick at 75 because I thought there were different directions they could have gone, but I like the process and I like his feet. I like the agility there. I think he is going to take some time to develop. So, it's one of those things. I liked Austin Booker so much. I wouldn't have been upset if they took Booker at 75 and if they got Amagaji later. I almost would have liked the draft more, but it's still the same players that I like. So where are you with the Amagaji selection?
I think he's a very toolsy player. He's 6'5", 320 with 36-inch arms. Like he's got tools on tools on tools, which is probably why they took him that high is, especially Ryan Poles being an offensive lineman. When he sees somebody who has more of God's gifts than Ryan ever could dream of, he's like, oh man, imagine what we could do with that. Because he played the position. He understands how hard it is, but it's a little bit easier when you got 36-inch arms. And so I think he took him thinking, all right, I trust my offensive line coaches to get the best out of him. Even if he's not at tackle as a rookie, he's, thick enough that I wouldn't be surprised if they are experimenting with him inside in camp to push Nate. Just because, again, the end goal is to get the best 5 on the field. And he's really, really talented. Again, he's not a finished product. He's not even close to a finished product, but he has so many tools that I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of move him around to push various guys and just see where he ends up. Because I don't necessarily think he's locked into swing tackle. I think he's locked into here's a freak athlete. We'll figure it out.
EJ, what do you think of his hands? Because that was where I had watching tape, and obviously I don't watch tape like you two. That was my biggest concern there. That's something that I would think Chris Morgan could work with. So how would you look at the unfinished product that Brett says? What kind of odds do you give that he can be that finished product that Ryan Poles clearly envisions?
I think it's up to coaching. I mean, coaching and the player. It's always a combination at this point, but he's got all the tools. They don't always work together. And you talked about hand usage. He's got those arms. Sometimes he doesn't shoot his arms. Like he doesn't even get his hands out there. It's like, man, you got 36-inch arms. You can be first in any exchange with the defensive lineman. Like do it. And he doesn't always do it. He doesn't always bend. His top doesn't always measure up with his bottom, right? In terms of his feet don't match his shoulders all the time. When all those things work together, oh my God, like you go, oh, that's why they picked him. But that doesn't happen all the time. So it's about consistency. It's not that he can't do any of those things. They saw all those flashes separately for sure. Sometimes together, not enough. That's why he went at 75 and not 45. But it's about marrying those things together so he can do it. We've seen him do it all. It's about, will he do it when, there are monsters across from him? Yeah, no, that's obviously going to have to be the determining factor. We'll see where that goes.
So let's stick with the trenches. Let's skip the 4th round pick. We'll finish with the 4th round pick and jump to the 5th round pick. I was delighted that they traded back. The trade works out really well. It's a 4th round pick in essence, a 2025 4th round pick for Ryan Bates and Austin Booker is kind of how that ended up working out. I was a fan of his tape. I mean, it's the 1 year wonder kind of aspect. I get it. But at that point in the 5th round, I think it's, I thought what he put together, the kind of skills he's showing already as a pass rusher, and the fact that the Bears don't have a lot of depth across this defensive line, I think they'll sign a veteran edge. I think there's a good chance maybe even it's Ngakoue comes back. But right now, there is an opportunity for Booker to get snaps and get them early. And I think, look, I talked to some draft people that thought if he stuck around one more year, he could be a late 1, early 2 in 2025. So that is a lot of promise that the Bears have as maybe what would be their 3rd edge.
Yeah, and I liked Booker a lot. I was lower on him than many other people because I didn't quite see a lot of bend. He's a very kind of straight line linear rusher, which like that can work obviously because he's like when he hit those long arm moves, like boy they hit right. He's got good effort. I think when he's picking a guard on a stunt because he's got so much pop, like he can really open up lanes on stunts and games. He almost kind of strikes me as like he doesn't have the coverage ability, but I'm talking like the role as a rusher of Leonard Floyd, back in the day where it's like setting up the pins for other people to finish. That's the kind of he's like a complementary rusher, right? So he's going to set up stunts. He's going to collapse the pocket. If you're asking him, hey, win on speed and then have enough dip to like get under the tackle and flatten around the corner and finish it yourself, I don't think he's got that. But I think he's a really good complementary piece to Montez and Dex and all the guys they've already got. I think you could throw him and Jacob Martin on the field together with some like really fancy 3rd down looks because I think Booker's got the power and Martin's got the speed and the bend. So like there is a universe where he has a very important role without getting a lot of the stats himself, if that makes sense.
No, it makes plenty of sense. And EJ, I'd love to get your thoughts on Booker, but I'd also like to get your thoughts on the defensive line, because obviously if there's an Achilles heel on this defense, it's up front. And, they're expecting a big jump from Gervon Dexter, who I know Brett was on this podcast a year ago and put a lot of concerns to rest because after that selection, everybody thought that Dexter was just going to be in his 3-point stance while the play was zipping by him. And Brett put a lot of that to rest, but now they're expecting Dexter to hopefully go out and prove that he can be that disruptive 3 tech. I don't know if he can make that jump this year. We'll see. Zach Pickens right now is the 3rd defensive tackle. There's not a lot of depth here, EJ. If there's any injuries, I think they're going to have some problems, but where are your thoughts kind of on Booker and this defensive line as a whole?
I really like Booker. I was a little higher on him than Brett was. I too would have been happy if they chose him at 75. There was some stuff that folks were concerned about that I heard about later, but from tape, he's got great length and he knows how to use it. So he looks faster than he is because he always consistently takes a half step less to get there. And a lot of time uses that length to lay out and grab the quarterback's ankles. And that's how he gets his sacks. And it's not a rare occurrence. It happens all the time on his tape. He understands how to weaponize that length and really lay out and disrupt quarterbacks. And whether that's a pressure or a sack. And then there was surprising power. A lot of people looked at his frame. He's taller. He's longer. He wasn't so thick. He's still developing. He's not finished physically developing as a player, but he could still stand guys up. Again, Brett called out the long arm moves. And when he locks out his arms, he can stand guys up. And that's pretty impressive. So again, he's got to put it together, but you talked about opportunity, Bill, and I think that's probably the biggest deal here is that the Bears have an opening. They need somebody to step up. It's a great role for Booker to step into. I'm happy they both waited and got him. Like I would have been unhappy if they waited and didn't get him. But where they got him, especially in what they paid for him, I think it was an absolutely fair cost. I think it was absolutely a value, actually, because again, would have been happy at 75. So I want to see how he fits into this rush rotation because Montez Sweat, we know what he brings to this defense. We saw the change from when he arrived, and it was marked. Andrew Billings in the middle, love that. Gervon Dexter, I think, showed a lot in his first year. Interestingly enough, I was on the Irish Bears show and they had interviewed Zach Pickens the week before, and they played a clip of that like as a teaser. I was pretty impressed with Zach's look back at his first year, his honesty, him talking about Dex being the guy that really saved him, that really came in and said, hey, man, we're supposed to struggle. You're a rookie. You're doing everything right. And sometimes it's not going to work out. It's the NFL. And he found a way to turn that to the positive. So anything he gives, I really think is a bonus. That's Pickens. And, the other side, it's, Demarcus Walker. You said it might be Ngakoue. Dominique Robinson could have a resurgence. Who knows? But there is no sure thing there. They're short there. They need more firepower. They definitely need a veteran. They still need some of the young guys to step up. So it's limited, I think, in pure pass rush outside Montez. He's got to stay healthy. If he does, I think it gives the opportunity for some of those younger guys to develop. If he doesn't, the pass rush production's probably not going to look great. It's going to look like it did before he got here. So,
yeah, and I'm out on Dom Rob. He hasn't had a good game since the game in the rain with the Niners. So I don't really think that's coming together.
That is a dart throw at this point.
But EJ, let me bounce back to you because we'll wrap up with the 4th round pick, of course, Torrey Taylor, the punter, because it doesn't sound like you were a big fan of that selection. So just kind of give me your thoughts on selecting a punter at 122.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the player. I want to start with the fact that Torrey Taylor is an amazing punter, a great football player. I think he's a pretty cool dude too. Saw his little bit from Australia when he was drafted and seems like a great guy to hang out and have a beer with. I think he's going to be a very good player for the Bears, period. This was not in his control. He doesn't select what the Bears do with their picks. The process is what gets me, because if you want a great punter, you can either pick them later. I realize the Bears didn't have any picks, or you can bring in 3 UDFAs, let them fight it out. The Bears have had some success with that approach in the past. Lots of other teams have done that as well. I think there were more valuable players. Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham obviously thought differently. Ryan Poles looked like he was actually going to try and trade up to take the punter, and Ian Cunningham was his sort of get back coach and said, whoa. Like, let's not do that. If he's there, let's take him. That's enough. So I thank Ian Cunningham for that, because if they traded up to get a punter, my brain would have exploded. It was already on the verge with spending a 4th on a punter. I just don't think the value is there. Now, Torrey Taylor, great punter, no argument there. I think he will. And the Bears needed, a solid punter. I'll say that. They got better than a solid punter. Great. It's a wash. I hope he has an excellent career. It's a lot of pressure to put on a punter or kicker. Like, you pick a kicker in the 3rd or 4th, they basically have to be a Pro Bowler or better, period. Like, that's the line as far as I'm concerned. That's a lot of pressure to put on any rookie. So we'll see how it works out. It's not about Taylor, the player. It's more about process.
All right, Brett, what are your thoughts? Because I agree with EJ. It's a high bar, and I do think Taylor has the ability to do it because, I had Patrick Manley in season on my podcast last year, and we were talking about Trenton Gill, and he just talked. We had a long conversation about his inability to get the ball inside the 10, basically ever. And that the opposing team was constantly starting at the 17, 18 instead of the 6. And it was and we just talked about it like that. If you play football, when you're in the offensive huddle and you're in your own end zone, it just changes your mindset. I mean, I've talked to guys, the famous Santonio Holmes touchdown in the Steelers. I've talked to Steelers offensive linemen who literally just said our goal on that drive was just to get a first down so we could punt. Like, that's all it was. And they drive down and win the Super Bowl. So it's a big mindset there to do that. And I think that's just what they want with Taylor. They just want the ability to pin because they just didn't have it with Gill.
A, I agree with that. B, I want to expand on it because I also, and I'm still kind of waffling on process of taking a punter this early. But I had a realization literally this week, right? Because I saw a clip from the Chiefs press conference where I can't remember which coach was talking, but they were talking about how Justin Reed, their safety, they think they're going to work him in as a kickoff specialist, right? Because of how the new kickoff rules are structured. The kicker, basically like can't cross the 50 until the ball is touched by the returner. And it essentially, you're almost coming from depth as a safety to be the last line of defense or like filling the alley. Like, that's the role of the kicker in the new kickoff structure, is like you got to be able to tackle. You're it, man. Like, you're filling the alley from like 15 yards deep. It's the same thing as a safety on a run play. And so they're experimenting with having Justin Reed do that so that they don't have to put Harrison Butker in position where it's like he has to make the tackle one-on-one or we're giving up a touchdown, right? And so I thought about it and I was like, okay, what if the Bears are taking Tory Taylor not just to be a punter, but also considering his experience growing up playing Aussie rules? What if he's also going to be the kickoff specialist so that we don't have to be in a position where Cairo Santos is standing between, insert Packers returner and a touchdown? Like, what if they actually want their kickoff specialist to be somebody who's hit somebody before? And now I'm starting to think, okay, if he's not just on the field 5 times a game, but he's also doing all the kickoffs too, and he's accurate enough to make it worth our while, I get it more, right? Again, I'm not saying I 100% would have done the same thing, but if he's punting and kicking and tackling, now I'm starting to come around to it.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And like you're saying, the Chiefs want Harrison Butker to stay in his lane and just kick field goals. So I thought, that's interesting. But let's get to the QB draft, because we've been talking a little longer than I wanted to on that. So again, I said QB draft. I shouldn't have said QB draft. I'm already leading people astray. So what we're doing here, we're doing an NFC quarterback situation draft. So we're not picking players, we're picking teams, and we're taking everything into account. And this is moving forward. This isn't a set 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It's just moving forward. So if you've got Jaden Daniels, you get potentially, 10, 12 years with Jaden Daniels. If you have Matthew Stafford, you're getting 2 or 3 years. So we're looking at everything moving forward. We're looking at teams that possibly have 2 quarterback options. Atlanta Falcons is obviously one that comes to mind. The rookie contract, the situation they're in. If they've already got an extension, how much they're getting paid. Are they outperforming that contract? Every aspect that comes into quarterback play, which for Chicago Bears fans, we talked about constantly last season with Justin Fields and what an extension would look like for him, and can he outperform the contract. So I used the randomizer on the internet and did a random. We're going to do a snake draft. We're going to do 4 rounds. So we'll leave 4 teams on the board here that won't get drafted, but we're going to do this as a snake. And the random had Brett earn the first pick, EJ earned the second pick, then I'll go 3rd and 4th pick. I'll do the end of the first round, start the second round, and we'll work back to Brett and go back and forth until we get 12. So I think I explained it well. If there's anything you guys want to add about quarterback situation, about what we're looking for, feel free. If not, then I will put Brett Kollmann on the clock.
I'll tell you what, it's very tempting to go Caleb here, right? Considering the value of the contract, because the standard that we're judging this by is CJ Stroud over in the AFC. Because you could argue that the most valuable non-Patrick Mahomes contract in the entire league is CJ Stroud, because he's a top 6 to 8 quarterback playing on a rookie deal for the next 3 years plus the 5th-year option. It's a pretty ridiculous value that Houston's got. And so if you think that Caleb is at minimum going to be an average quarterback as a rookie with the potential to be an above average quarterback or even a very good quarterback in like the top 10 to 12 range on a rookie deal, that is unfathomably valuable. But at the same time, do I want to take a rookie quarterback and first overall, essentially? And so I'm trying to balance contract value in the future with somebody who's been in the league, done it before, gone to a Super Bowl. And so I'm going with Jalen Hurts.
Wow.
The reason I'm going with Jalen Hurts, I know he's very expensive on a yearly basis, but if you're looking at how the contract is structured, there's like 7 void years on the back end of that thing. Like it technically ends in 2035, but it's 7 void years that slam home in 2029. But because of the way that the contract is structured, because $50 million a year is not just $50 million a year, like it's all about structures and how the bonuses are and everything like that. His base salary is never higher than $1.4 million, but he's paid in essentially a series of option bonuses that vest 1 to 2 years beforehand for each subsequent option bonus, and they kind of eventually stack on top of each other. And the void years are there to then spread out the cap hit of those option bonuses. And so what that does is in 2024, his cap hits 13 million. 2025, it's 21 million. 2026, it's 31. Year after that, it's 41. Year after that, it's 47. And again, there's room to kind of massage that down the line. But again, you're getting a quarterback who consistently, time and time again, has proven the ability to get better. Went to a Super Bowl, is a great leader, is an incredibly valuable asset in short yardage situations. And realistically, his cap hit is going to never be more than 30 million compared to some of the other quarterbacks in the league that are going to be a lot higher than that. I think as a balance between contract value and what we know he is in the NFL, I couldn't quite pull the trigger on Caleb yet. I really wanted to, but I'm going with Jalen.
Well, EJ, before you get to your pick, I'm curious what you think about that. I know we were talking before the podcast. You talked about kind of green being, I guess, elite, yellow being average, red being stay the heck away. Was this one of your green situations?
It was. I basically had I'll say 4.5 greens. I waffled on one. So let's call it 4.5 green teams. And Hurts was absolutely one of my green options because he has demonstrated the ability to run a top 10 offense in the NFL at a high level and, generate a bunch of that himself with his legs and with his arms. He's continued to improve. He's, not overaged. He's not, let's say, overpaid. He is paid, but, Brett outlined very, very adroitly like how he is paid. And I think that's fair for what he gives a football team because look, it's the most valuable position in all the NFL. And I think Billy did a good job with that. So yeah, it absolutely was one of my greens. So now I have 3.5 to pick from on pick 2.
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I had this as the number 5 spot. I had a little concerns based off the production from last year. That's what gave me the hesitation. If this was a year earlier, this probably almost certainly would have been my number 1 pick, slam dunk. But like I said, got a little scared. So that was 5. So that would have been my top yellow, I guess, so to speak. I had 4 greens as well. So EJ, with pick number 2, where are you going?
Brett started it. And if you're looking at Caleb, and if I take Caleb, of course, I'm wearing a Chicago shirt. I'm a Chicago fan. Everybody's going to say he's a homer. If we're looking at situation, Caleb is the futures bet. Caleb's floor right now is 0. He's played no downs in the NFL. Could be a bust. I don't think he's going to be. I have really high confidence he's not, actually. But his floor is 0. He could go out and, knock on wood, something bad could happen, and his football career could be much less than we think it's going to be. So he is a pure futures bet because the upside is almost unlimited. People talk about his upside in tones and did plenty before the draft. We don't need to do that. What you're betting is that you're going to get not a penny stock, but something in its infancy, right? Everybody's, if I could go back, 30 years, I'd buy Apple stock, right? Caleb Williams is Apple stock right now. People think it's going to go up, and it's incredibly cheap right now. Brett outlined how well that's going to play if really we need to judge this in 3 years, come back and say, okay, how's this thing stack up? There is a very good chance that Caleb's worth it at that point. The balance is people that remain in that green category that have done it, that have demonstrated it. And really, to me, you're looking at guys like Brock Purdy. I know people are going to get upset about that, but if you're talking about a guy that Steve Spagnuolo says gives him fits and he had to change his defense for in the second half because he was getting torn up in the first half, that's good enough for me. One of the best DCs in the NFL says, man, that guy's a pain in the ass to play against. And they have demonstrated results. They are always there in the hunt for the NFC. If you're looking at the NFC, by the way, I woke up first thing this morning and went, oh shit, I forgot Drake May. And I was like, oh, AFC, cool. I didn't forget anybody.
The amount of times my brain has put Drake May on Washington because I felt he should have been right. Number 2 pick has messed with me for months.
So that was my panic mode. But you're basically weighing against bird in hand. Purdy is there. He is reasonably young. He's been very effective in that offense. He shows no signs of slowing down versus the astronomical heights that we think Caleb can get to in the rookie situation that we outlined at the top of the draft. So it's basically like hitch your wagon and hope for the highest highs because Caleb is potentially one of those super weapon quarterbacks that can make the difference when you get to that Final Four and you're looking at, Mahomes and Allen and Lamar, and if Caleb's the fourth, like, he's in that conversation in terms of a physical player. Like, we'll see whether or not that comes to pass on the field. We all hope it does as Chicago fans. So got to go with the futures. I think the ceiling is higher. I believe in Caleb. I probably have more insight to him as a player, as a prospect, than I have, I would say, any other quarterback prospect in the last 5 years. I talked to more people who actually knew him, worked with him, got to see him at the pro day. Like, there, I just had more sort of hands-on with Caleb and Caleb's sort of atmosphere, halo of folks around him, coaches, players, whatever. My confidence is really high, and I'm just going to say, I think he's going to reach those. I think he's got every opportunity. This is what I said pre-draft. Physically, he's got every skill. The team around him, we talked a little bit about the offensive line, but in terms of weapons, it couldn't be better. And he's got every chance. If it doesn't happen now, it's up to the football gods. It's, he works hard. He's really smart. He's demonstrated all the skills. I'm going with Caleb.
Yeah, and was the big reason I wanted to do this with you guys, because you guys cover the entire league, so you've got a good feel for these other teams, and that's what we keep talking about, is this situation Caleb Williams is in. And when you eliminate the AFC, which obviously has a lot more quarterback talent than the NFC right now, that to me, Brett, and that's why I really wanted to do this, was to kind of see, when we got two national guys on here, where does the Chicago Bears situation fit? And I have a hard time saying that Caleb, I obviously, as a Bears fan, I was hoping that Caleb was going to make it to 3. That would have been my pick there, but not surprised he went top 2.
And I think this exercise really shows the disparity between the AFC and the NFC, because in the AFC, okay, you're taking Buffalo, you're taking Cincinnati, you're taking like, even with these contracts, you're taking Baltimore, you're taking Houston, obviously, you're taking Kansas City, you're taking the Chargers. Like, Bears aren't even top 6 in the AFC, and they're number 2 in the NFC, and hasn't even played it down yet. So NFC's been kind of down bad, and boy, they really needed Caleb in that conference. Like, they just need somebody who maybe possibly could eventually beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, because Jalen couldn't and Brock couldn't.
Yep, that's exactly where we are. So I am now on the clock with the final pick of the first round. So I thought thought he might slide because of the fandom of EJ and myself. So I'm going to anger Bears fans at this point. With the third pick, I am selecting the Green Bay Packers, and it hurts every bone in my body to do this, because look, Jordan Love seems like a good guy. He seems like the kind of guy you can cheer for. But as a Bears fan, any idea that they may have gotten the quarterback situation correct again is just nails on a chalkboard for me. But I am taking the Packers. And there's a lot that goes into it besides what I saw out of Jordan Love the second half of the season. I think the offense around him is only going to improve. He was playing with basically a bunch of guys who had as little experience as he did. They will improve. I am a huge fan of Matt LaFleur and what he is able to execute offensively. I know Love is about to get a hefty contract. So I'm a big fan of not just looking at the rookie contract, but when you extend a quarterback, are they going to be able to outperform their contract? Obviously, it doesn't matter what you pay Patrick Mahomes. He's going to outperform the contract. Kyler Murray, that hasn't really happened, and we see what happens to the Cardinals. So it's an important aspect to think about these quarterbacks with an extension. So, EJ, I'll go to you here. I'm going the Packers with Jordan Love, despite that hefty extension coming here soon. I think this is a situation that is hard to imagine things going significantly south.
Yep. 3-part answer. First off, no argument about the player or the coaching relationship, and that's really important. I think Love has already demonstrated a high level of skill in that offense. That puts him, right now ahead of Caleb in terms of he has demonstrated that on the field. And yes, it is galling. I understand that. But as a critic of process, I'm going to crush you on process right now, because you have 3 and 4. So if you wanted Love, you could have had him at 4, guaranteed. And then it would have been 4, not 3. I'm just saying it ends up the same, but it looks better for you. You're going to take less crap in the comments. So as a process, flawed. as a player, like Love was one of my greens. Absolutely. I don't think there's any way to look at, especially the end of last season, and not say that about the Green Bay situation with LaFleur, with Love as a young and developing quarterback who is already playing at a high level, as you said, with a surrounding cast that is presumably only going to get better, more experienced. You can't not have him in the top 4.
Any thoughts, Brett?
I thought maybe I would have had a shot to get him at 6. But unfortunately, you guys are too logical to let him fall that far. I mean, he looks like a top 12 quarterback. And I'm saying top 12 and not higher than that because, like, we also have to factor in everything that happened before Thanksgiving. But, like, from Thanksgiving on, if you're top 6 from Thanksgiving on and you're somewhere between 15 to 18 before Thanksgiving, I'm just going to average it out to top 12. But, again, the fact that the Packers got a top 12 quarterback again, 3rd in a row, potentially could end up being a top 6 to 8 again. It pisses me off because there are Packers fans that were born in the 90s or even late 80s, right? Before they really had like functional thoughts, right? So they were born and then grew up in the Brett Favre era, immediately went to the Rodgers era. They went through high school, they went through college, they got married and had kids, and their own kids now are going to be in the same age as when they grew up with Brett Favre. And in that entire time, they never had a bad quarterback situation. Yeah, they had a couple of injury years. They experienced like 4 weeks of Brett Hundley, boo-hoo. But like they were never in a spot where it's like, oh God, guess we got a tank. Like they never had to do that. And these guys are already grown up and have their own families. It's terrible. Like it's absolutely terrible because these people don't know what it's like to root for a bad football team. And I feel like that builds character. Like Bears fans have character. Packers fans have no character. They have no soul. It's unbelievable and it's un-American and I hate it.
Yeah, I've talked about it. Like you have to be 40 years old at a minimum as a Packers fan to have any even just minor memory of bad quarterback play. I am old enough. I start with a 4 there in the ones column or in the 10s column. So I remember the 80s Packers and them not having a quarterback and what it was like. And it was a glorious thing, them not being able to score on that Bears defense. But here they are, and it does look like they've done it again. I don't know if it's a Hall of Fame, but they've done it again. And yeah, it is certainly frustrating. So I will take the first pick of the second round, the 4th overall selection, and I'm going with the San Francisco 49ers. And this was the situation. I was curious about where you guys stood with this because NFL content creators and fans love to knock Brock Purdy. It is something that people love to do. And I will use the Ryan Poles quote. When you're looking at a quarterback, show me what you can do. I'm not worried about what you can't do. So yes, Brock Purdy's not going to, confuse anyone with Justin Fields or what Patrick Mahomes' arm talent or anything. But this guy executes an offense. He plays on time. He anticipates throws. The things that as Bears fans, we have not seen in basically a decade. This is and they got him with the Mr. Irrelevant pick. And the fact that what he has done has bailed out the 49ers. The 49ers are executing as the best team in the NFC, a Super Bowl contender, while completely blowing the Trey Lance trade and pick. And the only reason that's possible is Brock Purdy. I'm a big fan of him. I think he's perfect for what Kyle Shanahan wants to do. So, Brett, I'll ask you. I'm taking the San Francisco 49ers and Brock Purdy here with the first pick of the second round. Your thoughts?
It's a great pick. And I just want to say to all the people, it's like, well, yeah, anybody could succeed in that offense. You got all those weapons and, you got Trent at left tackle. Okay. Why didn't Trey Lance succeed? Why wasn't Sudfeld breaking the passing record? Like, why was Jimmy G actively replaced even after making a Super Bowl? Oh, because Brock's better. Like, that's it. That's the answer. Because Brock's better. If this offense is so easy to succeed in, which we know it's not, like, I've got the playbook. I know how complicated this offense is. It's not easy to master. It's not easy to run. But if everything's so easy, how come Trey Lance got on the field for like 2 weeks and then never saw it again, despite, quote unquote, being a lot more talented. Why is that? Oh, because Brock's really good. So I think it's a fallacy, right? That people see all the talent around him and they just assume it's all the talent doing the work. Not true, because Brock's really good under pressure. He's really good pre-snap. He's really good post-snap. He's really accurate. There are some throws that like he's not the best in the league at because he doesn't have a Justin Herbert arm. But okay, if that's like the one thing that we can point to of like, oh yeah, he's not doing far hash hole shots against cover 2. Okay, well, if he's better than 95% of other quarterbacks at everything else a quarterback needs to do, like, what are we doing here? Like, they went to the freaking Super Bowl for a reason. They went to the NFC Championship the year before that and legitimately had a shot of winning that game before he got hurt for a reason. Like, they didn't lose with him for like the first 11 games for a reason. He's really good. And I need people to understand this. Even in the first part of last season when, people were pulling up the tape and they're like, I don't know about this. I feel like he's about to come crashing down to earth. He was still rehabbing until November. And I know that because I talked to the guy that did the rehab. Like, he was still rehabbing 70% of the way through the season. And then once he was done with rehab at the end of November and through December and January, and we kind of saw like Brock get that pop back, like, go figure. So like the fact that he was playing through rehab and made the Super Bowl with like one little hiccup in the middle of the season where they dropped like 3 or 4 or something like that. Like, come on, what are we doing here? He's a good quarterback. I'm not saying he's a top 5 quarterback, but he's a really good quarterback.
Yeah, that's exactly my thoughts. And when I say this, EJ, this is not to be comparing the player. I want to stress that when I say this. But if you wind the clock back about 18, 19 years, this argument was being made constantly about an AFC quarterback, and his name was Tom Brady. That, it's Bill Belichick. It's the offense he's executing. He's a game manager. Things worked out pretty well for him.
Very well, and I'm with you. It's not comparing player, but in terms of situation, I think the situation is comparable. Brady was very good in that situation, and very good in other situations as well. So we know what Tom is. He went elsewhere, did what he did. He's the GOAT for a reason. But I'm with Brett. You take Purdy out of that situation and replace him with all the guys they had before. Kyle has been looking. And he hasn't stopped looking. And some people called him overcritical. Some people said he should just ride with former starters. Like, some people said he could do it with anybody because of the Sudfelds and whatever else. He hasn't done what he's done with Brock with anybody else. The reason Brock's still there and they are hands off, they are not trying to replace Brock Purdy. You don't hear, San Francisco is trying to trade up for a quarterback this year. You don't hear that. They're set. They're settled. They got their guy. He is doing exactly what they want him to do. And what more can you ask? He is taking them to the championship game or the Super Bowl, that window, basically every year. And he did it. The rehab part is amazing because he was hurt late and missed basically no time and still took him back to the Super Bowl, like took him right to the porch, took him in. And if you look at that quarterback after a couple of years, given all of that, especially the injury part, and go, he's not good, you're just not paying attention. Like, you got to listen to guys like Spagnuolo who are really smart and get paid a lot to orchestrate one of the best defenses in the league. And he goes, that guy's a pain in the ass. He made us switch what we were doing. Like, that's the highest praise you can get in the NFL if you're listening. And he got it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, EJ, we'll put you on the clock here with pick number 5.
And this is my half. This is my 4.5 where I struggle to, we're still sort of in the green, but could be yellow. Depends on your piece. I have the luxury in this draft of not having to account for the sins of the fathers. Like, I didn't take the actions to set these quarterback rooms. Now that it's taken, I'm going to take Atlanta because we can argue about process and Penix, and I think we came up with it on the live stream. It hit me that the reason that they probably did this is because they know they're going to get docked their first round pick next year. And at that point, Cousins is in 2 years and they don't have a successor. They would have to eat the sort of quarterback development year after that. That's 3 years from now. And the argument for doing it this year is, do you want to be last year's Jets? And if the answer is no, and Cousins goes out there, same injury, and it doesn't go well, or he re-injures something else, or he just goes down from something else, right? Quarterbacks go down. What are you looking at if there's no quarterback behind him on the roster? You're looking at the Jets, right? Again, a very talented roster that now just basically is kind of chalking up a lost season and trying click off as many wins as they can, but it's over as soon as Cousins goes down. Now, if Cousins goes down, which I don't want to happen, I would love to see him run that offense. You've got Penix, promising young passer who looks like he can distribute the ball to the many weapons they have there. And you're probably going to keep rolling. Yes, you're still going to take the rookie lumps, but you're getting it out of the way in 1 year instead of 2. Like, I get it from a process standpoint. I'm not going to say it's what I would have done, but I understand it in post. And here I just get to choose that situation. And again, it's not one quarterback or 2, it's the situation. And if you're looking around at the situation for other teams in terms of, we've got what looks like the possibility for an orderly transition between 2 very talented quarterbacks. If Cousins plays great for 2 years, great. If he plays great for 1 year and then he says, I'm going to hang it up and hang out with my kids, great. Penix still on his rookie contract. Yes, you get 1 year less of it. That seems like splitting hairs. I'm going to take Atlanta.
Yeah. Hey, look, EJ, this was my 4th green. So I don't disagree here, and I agree with everything you said. Brett, I'm curious what you think. Again, I hated the process because when you have a 36-year-old quarterback that you paid $160 million to or whatever it was, you need to try and help him immediately, and you have a top 10 pick to do it. So I hated the process, but now that the process is done, it's kind of like me with Matt Eberflus. I wanted Matt Eberflus fired because I wanted them to bring in an offensive-minded head coach for Caleb, but now that he's here, I'm supporting Matt Eberflus, and I want him to succeed as coach because I don't need them blowing up another coaching staff around my rookie quarterback. Same thing with the Falcons. I wouldn't have done this, but now that it's here, it's a good situation. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry, I had sirens going in the background, so I muted myself while EJ was talking. I mostly just feel bad for Michael Penix, because, again, he's an older prospect, and now at minimum, probably like 2 years of his rookie deal are out the window. Unless Kirk just completely implodes because of the Achilles, and then they just kind of eat it after a year, which I don't think they're going to do. I think it's going to be a 2-year thing. But that means 2 years of his rookie deal are getting eaten, which means by the end of the 3rd year, he might only have 1 year as a starter, which means he's going to have to wait probably until the end of his 4th year, going into his 5th year option. I'm just thinking from a financial perspective, if he works out, like, it's going to be a long time until he can actually get paid and actually show what he can do in order to incentivize getting paid. And I know that by then, like, quarterback contracts are going to be like $70 million a year, but still, like, it just sucks for the player that this is somebody who a lot of people perceived as somebody who could get on the field and start very early. And because of where he went, he's not going to get to, which is going to delay, it's going to delay the start of his career by 2 years. And I just think that really sucks for him because, Michael Penix if he went to the Raiders, he's starting week 1. But because of where he went, we're not going to see him probably till like 2026. And that's just unfortunate for him.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
You know who just did that? That's already been picked. That's already been picked in this draft.
Who?
Love.
But Love had to redo like the back end of his contract to give him enough time to show it. And
I think that might be what happens to Penix if that timeline that you put up plays out, which is entirely reasonable. Like, that is a very probable timeline. And they might look to the Packers model and say, hey, we're going to give you another year. We're going to basically give you this bridge year of money, which is not, full-time starter money, and it's not full-time extension money, but we want to see one more thing. They might look at that very same situation. And while, yeah, I'm sure Penix is a rugged competitor. He wants to be on the field. He hopefully has had a chance to sit back and look at this and go, this is pretty cool. I get to learn. I get to know my teammates. I get to, see the speed of the NFL in practice. I get some advantages here. There are disadvantages. And yeah, if you give me the choice, I'm starting day 1. But here's the situation. Cousins is a great quarterback. I can watch what he does. Again, my weapons are pretty good, and I'm not under the gun week 1. And when I get there, I should be damn good and ready.
All right, Brett, you are on the clock for the final pick of the 2nd round.
So this one's really tough because I'm left with the decision between like, do I do a complete gamble and go like JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels because of the contract value? Or do I take the more known quantity that has kind of a funky contract that I'm going to have to figure out down the line? So ultimately, I decided to go with the known quantity with the funky contract. That's Jared Goff. He's 30 in his age 30 season. He just got an extension, bunch of money per year. But again, not all contracts are the same. And his contract is kind of interesting because his cap hit is $27 million this year. It's $32 in 2025. Jumps up to $69.6 million as a cap hit in 2026. But his base salary is $55. And so if what happens that I think will happen, which is the team will trigger converting that base into a signing bonus that's split over the next 4 years, if we're including the void year on the back end, that $66.9 or $69.6 million cap hit will get reduced by $41 million in 2026 and bring it down to like 28 or something like that. So it's basically a 3-year window of sort of kind of semi-manageable cap hits. And then everything goes to hell in 2027. And by then, I think the Lions are thinking, well, either we won the Super Bowl or we didn't, and nothing matters, right? So I'm kind of operating from that perspective of the Lions are giving themselves a 3-year window to win. And, if they win it like the Rams did, then who cares? They'll do a tear down and rebuild and all that kind of stuff. The Rams ended up doing it a lot quicker, but still, like, they're willing to eat that, miserable year if they win a Super Bowl in the next 3. If they don't win in the next 3, they're kind of screwed, but I think they're going to cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And you guys are making me feel smart because it wasn't the exact same order, but these were my top 6 situations. So feeling pretty good about my list. And and I will say this, EJ, we'll get your thoughts on this, and then we'll try and pick up the pace for the last 2 rounds. But with Jared Goff, had Ben Johnson taken a head coaching job this offseason, my thought process on Goff might have changed. But the fact that he can execute this Ben Johnson offense like he can, I think it's a top 6 situation.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There would have been more uncertainty, but not a ton of uncertainty, because I don't think the Lions would have tried to throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, hey, we need a whole new offense. They would have found a Johnson protege, maybe promoted from within, and said, what we have is working and working really well enough that we just gave, Goff this extra money. We're on plan. I think when you look from the GM down with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, this is what they thought was going to happen. I mean, this is what all coach GM pairings think is going to happen when they take the job, but it has happened for Detroit, and they don't want to upset the apple cart. So I'm pretty sure they would have got somebody from the same tree, but you'd never, play calling is such a sort of mystical art. It's such a fine balance that you never know, just because somebody knows or has the same playbook or the same approach, that they're going to be able to work it the way that Ben does, because he's special in that regard.
He really is. So, all right, kicking off the back half of the draft, pick number 7, Brett, where are you going?
I'm going to do my rookie dart throw at this point, and I'm going to go with JJ McCarthy over Jaden Daniels, which I know a lot of people wouldn't expect. But, I had this belief during draft season that the 3 and or possibly 2 quarterbacks that I thought would work out the most were Caleb, Drake May, and whoever ended up in Minnesota. That ended up being JJ McCarthy. In terms of weapons, short of the Bears situation with Caleb, like, you couldn't ask for better weapons. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, they have a collection of guys who potentially could be their third receiver, but honestly, their third receiver is TJ Hockenson whenever he comes back healthy. They have a really good tackle tandem. They have a great play caller. They got Aaron Jones in the backfield. Like, the defense played a lot better with Brian Flores. Like, it's a pretty good structure to develop a rookie quarterback in. So I have more faith in JJ McCarthy in that structure than I do in Jaden Daniels in the Washington structure, even though I had Jaden ranked ahead of McCarthy in my pre-draft rankings. Like, so much of quarterback success just depends on where you go. and JJ went to the much better spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally get that. Here's my biggest concern as a Bears fan. I've seen the bring in a bridge, not legitimately sit behind Alex Smith or Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers, but I've seen the bring in Mike Glennon or bring in Andy Dalton so the rookie can sit. And I get that JJ McCarthy is a baby and has barely thrown the ball in college. I get all that. But right now, it seems like it's going to be Sam Darnold and JJ later on in the year. I hate that. That's my only concern there, EJ.
Yeah, I'm not wild about it either. It was one of my yellows, my mid-tier situations. Was not the first, was probably not the second or even the third. So, again, as somebody in a draft, I'm like, hey, cool, it's off the board. I didn't need to pick them. That's fine. Again, it's potential, and Brett's taking his potential pick here. I took mine right at the top of Caleb. So when I get back to my pick, I'm going to waffle between potential and something a little bit more solid, because you want to balance the room. That's the point of the draft, is to balance these situations and say, hey, I have my ultimate dart throw in Caleb that, could be an absolute comet. I got to get something a little bit more solid in some of my other picks.
All right. Well, it is time for you to pick, EJ. So what do you got?
Yeah, I got a few yellows left, and it really does come down for me. I think Kyler's a consideration, but Kyler feels much more like a known. What it's really going to come down to me for is Washington, Jaden Daniels. We talked about that, but that is another complete dart throw, and the situation is not as good. Brett pointed that out. It's true. And then Seattle with the mix of Geno and Sam Howell. And I like Sam. He went off the rails at the end of last year. He tried to do too much like a quarterback that's now in Chicago, and he threw the ball and he wasn't safe with it. He threw a bunch of picks and it didn't balance out for his team. It cost his team. But I saw him, strangely enough, live last year in Seattle versus the Seahawks, and he scared the hell out of them. He pushed that game to extra time, basically by himself. He willed it to happen, and you could see the Seahawks going, what in the world will this guy just knock it off? And he wouldn't. And I think that stuck with Seattle decision makers when they were looking for now is it a backup? Is it a successor? Either, right? We're looking at the entire situation. Geno is good to go this year. I think he's going to see a little bit of a rebound in Ryan Grubb's system. I think JSN is going to have a monster year. He's already looked that way in camp. Like, the situation looks good for this year, but down the road, I think Howell could turn into a more Goff-like situation. Now, I'm not saying same player as Goff. He is clearly not the same player as Jared Goff, and Jared Goff deserved to be picked higher in this draft. But if he gets, again, a chance to sit, a chance to work with a different OC, a better situation, gets some time to clean that up and gets back on the field, I think we could see the good things that he brings, which are many. Throws a great deep ball. He's an aggressive player. He can absolutely use his legs. And if you clean up those mistakes and pull him down, I think he might be that player that people thought Goff was when he went to Detroit. They thought, that's just the throw in so they have a quarterback until they go get their quarterback. I think a lot of people see Howell the same way right now, and I think he might be a little bit better than that with the situation as it's evolving in Seattle. So I took my dart throw at the top. I love Jaden. If I wanted just pure potential, I would pick him. I'm actually going to pick Seattle here with Geno and Sam Howell.
I think that's interesting. I had Seattle further down on my list, and my reason behind that was the fact that I don't think they have what I would call their future quarterback on the roster. I know you've got,
and they might not. You might be correct.
Howell does show flashes, and Geno, we'll see if he's still trending down or if he can bounce back a little bit. But what do you think, Brett? Interesting pick for me.
Yeah, I think if it's like we're drafting for this year, 100%. If we're drafting for, what are we going to be like in 2027? And it's like, I don't even know if either of them are going to be there. So, but that's also, again, that's the NFC, because there's just not that many long-term situations to pick from. And so now we're in the part of the draft where it's like, I don't know, I guess like that's every team in this part of the draft is like, I guess, it's like, oh, we're going to take Derek Carr. That's all that's kind of left at this point, which is how shallow the NFC is.
All right, so I am on the clock here. I will wrap up this round with Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. So everyone's taken their rookie. Brett's got Minnesota. EJ's got Chicago. I will go with Washington. I agree. The situation is not as good as either of the other two rookies. It's not terrible. Like, I'm afraid for Drake May in New England if he plays right away. I have a fear for him of getting David Card. So with this one, I think it's not terrible. It's not great. And Jaden Daniels, the player, I like JJ McCarthy more as a prospect, honestly. There's some things about Jaden that concern me. But when we're looking at the draft, and that's what I'm doing right now, guys, I will take the rookie contract and the potential over a lot of what else is out there. So we'll start with you, Brett. Quick thoughts so we can speed this up a little bit. Thoughts on selecting Jaden here?
It's a super high upside swing, right? He's a good kid. We always say progression isn't linear, but then you look at his progression being pretty darn linear in college, and you're like, okay, well, hasn't gone down yet over the course of 5 years. Very good touch and accuracy on deep balls, especially outside the numbers. He's an electric runner. I wish that he wouldn't, run into traffic so much and put himself in harm's way, but I respect the moxie. So he's a good kid, good player, very talented. If you're going to do a dart throw, I totally get it.
Anything further to add, EJ? I know you've already talked about him a little bit.
Might take a year to work out that the talent around him. There's some talent. We're going to see some flashes, but I think it's going to be frustrating because I think different parts are going to break every week. The offensive line's not going to protect 1 week. They're going to get that cleaned up, and the receivers might not get separation the next week. And the next week it might be Jaden's fault. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be Sterling in this, but he's a great learner. His progression has been amazing, especially if you look at the last 2 years of his career at LSU, and seems like he's committed in the right way to be a learner. So again, I have faith, but I think Washington fans probably also need a little bit of patience. This is probably not going to be that Comet CJ Stroud rookie year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So let me move on to my final selection in this draft. I've got a few different ways I could go. But I'm going to take a mess with the 10th pick. It's a mess because the team has mishandled everything. I don't know how much longer he's going to be there, but he may be there another 5 or 6 years. But the fact that we are at the 10th pick overall and arguably the most talented quarterback in the NFC is still on the board. I don't know if you agree or not, and I don't know if he is, but he's in the argument. I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys here. Now, you can knock me for it, and I know I can get knocked for it because with Micah and CeeDee, I don't know what they're going to do with these contracts. But bottom line here, EJ, we'll start with you. I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys just because if they do get the contract figured out and get Dak on the dotted line, you've got a talented quarterback for several years.
If
I get it, I'm rolling the dice.
If and it's time to roll the dice. Look, this is what you do later in the draft. Later in any draft, right? You go, look, the potential's amazing. I can't lay off it anymore, which is what teams do. It's what Chicago did with Booker. Like, hey, man, it's the 5th round. Like, let's go get him. He's a talented player. Dak I have as a red because of Dallas's situation, not because of Dak. Again, we're not picking quarterbacks. We're picking quarterback situations. And if, Jerry and Dallas decide to dig their heels in and go, nah, we can do it again. We can find another one, which is the ultimate arrogance of an NFL team. When you have a player who is as good as Dak, that situation could be very, very difficult. Now they could do the Green Bay thing. I don't necessarily think they will because the odds are against it, but they could. And then, yes, you could be great there, or they could get the contract figured out, but they also have to get the surrounding cast figured out because the money's stacking up with a very few very talented players, and you do have to build the rest of the roster. They've done a pretty good job of that. But again, my confidence was low enough. They slipped into my 3rd tier here. So love Dak, the player. The situation to me feels really tenuous right now. I hope they work it out. Certainly for Cowboys fans, quarterback stability is a good thing to have. I say that as a fan of a franchise that has not had it. I understand what that means. So I hope for their sake it works out. If not, it's going to be really interesting to see where Dak goes. I'll throw this one out there. What if John Snyder just swings next year and goes, yeah, we're bringing Dak to Seattle?
Yeah, none of that would surprise me. So, Brett, why don't you give me your thoughts on Dak and the Dallas situation, and then just go right into pick 11, or then EJ go right into pick 11.
Sure.
If you really want Dak long term, you might as well take the Giants. Like that's where I like. It's like it kind of feels like that's what's gonna
Yeah.
If there's a leader in the clubhouse of where Dak is playing in 2025, I don't think it's Dallas. I think it's New York. So it's like, yeah, if we're going for this year, 100% take the Cowboys. If we want Dak in 2025, 6, 7, 8, yeah, I think it's another team, probably.
Might be, but again, I'm rolling the dice over what was left. So EJ, go for it.
Yeah, with the yellows that I have left, I'm looking at Baker in Tampa.
Yep.
That's not. I mean, I like it, but Dave Canales, who is in Carolina, moved on. That takes me to Carolina. Bryce, talented quarterback. They're going to fix a lot of their problems, especially the offensive line. And, you know, if anybody's going to get Bryce to achieve what he can, I think Dave Canales is the ultimate pick. That would really be a pick of Dave Canales more than it would be of Bryce. But I'm going to go with Kyler in Arizona. Very talented quarterback. And I really like what Monty's doing as their GM. From a process standpoint and also from a production standpoint. The players they brought in over the last couple of years have changed that team and will continue to do it. He's got a huge target now in Marvin Harrison Jr. They continue to rebuild other parts of that team. If I'm looking for, like, again, 2 to 3 years as a window, I think Kyler can certainly stay healthy. He's a dynamic quarterback. He can be, at that point, you know, an athletic distributor to the weapons that Monty is assembling. I'm going to take Arizona here.
That honestly, that was the other pick I was considering there, because I do think Kyler has bounced back, especially with Harrison and also I think that's a good selection. Brett, what do you think?
If he didn't do it, I was going to do it, honestly. So as far as talented quarterbacks that are locked up semi-long-term at this point that are on the board, he's kind of it, you know, because like you could also argue Stafford, but it's like, I don't know if Stafford's going to be there in 2 years. He might be retired at that point. So yeah, again, it's slim pickings, but you know, as far as slim pickings go, hard to do worse, or hard to do better, I should say.
All right, well, Brett, let's wrap up the draft with the final selection, the 12th pick overall. So for those scoring at home, teams left on the board: the New York Giants, the New Orleans Saints, the Carolina Panthers, the LA Rams, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I'm going to go with Tampa Bay. And it's just mainly because I have more confidence in Baker being there long-term than I do in Stafford being in LA long-term. I just get the sense that this might be kind of like a last ride situation down in LA. So similar to Dallas, like, do I want to get a good quarterback for maybe 1 year, you know? So I'm going with Tampa Bay because Baker's going to be there for at minimum 3 years, potentially even more than that. He's had a really nice career bounce back, had a wonderful year in Tampa last year with Dave Canales. But I think Canales leaving hurts, but I also think that Baker himself, like, you know, you got to be out there and making throws. You got to make throws, and he made the damn throws, even though the play calling was really good. Like, he still showed himself to be a quality passer still at this point in his career. So I think this is going to be a minimum 3-year thing for him in Tampa. And if you're looking at the contract structure, I know the cap hit goes from $7 million this year up to essentially 36 next year, but because of the void years that are tacked onto it, they can kind of massage that a lot and make his cap hit under 15 million next year and under 20 million the year after that. So he's pretty cheap for the next 3 years. And if you're getting a quality starting quarterback, I'm not saying great starting quarterback, but quality starting quarterback for cheap, you know, for the next few years, like that's pretty good value to me. So I'll go with him.
EJ, your thoughts?
It's between him and Bryce. And Bryce is, again, a vote for Canales. And, hey, he will achieve some of the promise we saw of him coming out of college, because nobody's got a better record than Canales. We've already talked about Geno. We've already talked about Baker. Like, he resuscitated 2 of them in 2 consecutive years. Bryce has got the best shot he's got going. But I don't disagree that Baker is playing at a new level. I hope there's not a drop-off for him, because he's done it pretty consistently for a couple of years now. And that, again, was his promise coming out. And we've gotten to see more good Baker than bad Baker the last couple of years. It's been a lot of fun. So I hope that continues for him. It's do you want to go back to upside, or do you want to go with player that is doing it and has done it now for a couple of years at a much higher level?
EJ, who are your 4 Reds?
My 4 Reds were Dallas with Dak, because of, again, the situation and the kind of the storm clouds brewing if that doesn't happen. The Rams with Stafford, because Stafford is an absolute warrior. He was in his time in Detroit. He's taken so many injuries to places you don't want quarterbacks to take injuries to, his back, his whatever else. At some point, I got to believe that he just goes, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that might be next year. And if that's the case, you're kind of left holding the bag, and there is not necessarily a successor in waiting there. So overall situation, not great. New Orleans with Carr, again, they don't really have what's next behind him. Even if he shows a resurgence this year, to what level is he going to be? Like 16th best quarterback in the NFL, which was kind of where he topped out before. So not a great situation. And then the Giants with Danny, like, come on, like Danny is done in New York. They have to try him out one more time. They don't have the guy. They're presumably going to get the guy next year. And that could make, you're basically betting on what's behind door number 3. If you pick the Giants, like, could be Dak, could be a great rookie, could be. We don't know. So it's just the uncertainty. So it was more the uncertainty in those situations that made my 4 Reds.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And I told you I had 3 Reds. I kept Dallas in the yellow, right at the bottom towards the yellow, just because of the fact. And that's like, I actually
kind of orange, yellowish, reddish.
Yeah, and I was just like, I just sitting there. I'm like, I'm just gonna make sure that the Prescott talent is selected, and that you cross your fingers that Jerry and them figure it out. So, Brett, kind of overall thoughts on the exercise, and I kind of assume you agree with EJ there on the kind of the bottom there with the Giants and the Saints.
Yeah, it's teams where it feels like they don't have a present plan or a future plan. It's just, we're winging it, and the Giants are in full on, like, we're going to build the roster before we get the quarterback. Like, they're not even trying at this point. It may be that if they got Drake May, they could have tried to do the whole quarterback before the roster thing again, just because Drake is that good. He's a much better prospect than Daniel Jones ever was. But in the absence of them getting Drake in the draft, I think they acquiesced and were like, we're not going to put JJ into the same situation we put Daniel Jones in. We're not going to put, Penix or Bo Nix into that same situation. Like, let's just build the roster. We'll take Malik Neighbors. We'll keep building the offensive line. We'll keep adding weapons. We'll get, our pass rusher and Brian Burns that we desperately need. And I think they finally figured out that quarterback doesn't fix everything. It helps, but it doesn't fix everything. And so they're trying to fix everything and then get the quarterback.
Yeah, no, I agree, guys. I really appreciate you guys doing this exercise with me. I think the NFC is a fascinating conference with these quarterbacks, and, a lot's going to evolve over the next couple of years too, which I think, a lot of these AFC teams, it's locked in. We know it's Mahomes. We know it's Herbert. We know it's Jackson, Burrow, etc. This NFC is going to be evolving. Some of these quarterbacks are probably going to, like Dak, could be on the move. I think it's a fascinating conference. And I think I wanted to do this on a Bears podcast, guys, because I just feel like trying to explain and show how the Bears situation compares to the rest of the conference when you're trying to make a Super Bowl, just it really puts it into perspective. So thank you guys for so much time. A little longer than I was hoping to get you out in an hour, a little bit longer than that. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, happy to take the time. A little bit extra is always fun. And I think you're right. It's fascinating bunch of situations. And even if you're looking specifically at the Bears situation, because a lot of your listeners will be, like, even if you went with absolute production over potential, how low do you put Caleb, right? 4th at worst, right?
Yeah,
at worst. And he's not even played it down. So that's kind of crazy. Certainly wouldn't be the same in the AFC.
All right, bear down, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.